Welcome back to Sports Rule Pod. I'm Nick Elam. Here we explore innovations in sports and the journeys of individuals who make sports great. In today's interview segment, we're joined by Dan Bonner, who is one of the most prolific voices in the history of the NCAA Tournament. He'll share the best career advice he ever received. He'll share his thoughts on expanding the NCAA Tournament, and he'll share why he says it was a brilliant move by a university athletic director to end Dan's stint as the head coach of the basketball team. In the innovation segment, we'll explore yet another major innovation in Major League Baseball, the automated ball strike challenge system. And in the next to last segment, we'll step outside the world of sports to revisit the next to last episode of one of the most revolutionary television series of all time, The Sopranos. So let's get to it. We are so pleased to be joined by Dan Bonner on the podcast. Dan Bonner is one of the most familiar voices of the NCAA Tournament. He has been on the broadcast team at least one of the sites for the NCAA Tournament dating back all the way to 1991 and still counting. He's also been an analyst for ACC Network on ESPN and various other outlets. And he's had many other experiences throughout his journey that we'll touch on later. Dan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining.
Well, Nick, thank you for the invitation. I'm very flattered.
I wonder, do you know where you rank among all of the NCAA Tournament broadcasters in terms of number of games called? You have to be up there pretty high.
Well, that's an interesting question. And I think that now that Jim Nantz has retired from doing the NCAA Tournament, that Bill Raftery has been there and doing the games longer than I. But I think that I'm either right behind Bill or pretty close to it.
Now, when you think back to all of the NCAA Tournament games that you've called, which one stands out or which one comes to mind first in your memory? Maybe it was a great game. Maybe it was an ugly game. Maybe it was something that you had a personal milestone of your own for being there. What's the first NCAA Tournament game that comes to your mind when you think back the many that you've called?
That's interesting. There's been a lot of them, and I've been thrilled to be involved in so many of them. But the one that really jumps up at me is the game between Kansas and Northern Iowa. When Kansas was the overall number one seed in the tournament, and I think Northern Iowa was a 9. Yeah, they had won the 8-9 game in thrilling fashion against UNLV in the first round. And then in the second round, they beat Kansas. And they beat Kansas basically when Ali Farokhmanesh took a ridiculous three-point shot at the end of the game when you figure you're going to hold the ball and try for the last shot. And he took a three, and he made it, and they won the game. And, I have run into Ali Farokhmanesh a couple of times as an assistant coach and a head coach, and we always laugh about that. Bill Self doesn't laugh about that, but Ali Farokhmanesh and I do. And even though I've done lots of them, I've done lots of buzzer beaters and everything like that, that's the game that if somebody's going to say NCAA Tournament in 35 years, that would be the first one.
I remember that game vividly, watching it as a fan, and that's the classic shot of as it's going through the air, as a fan or as a Northern Iowa coach, I'm sure, saying no, no, no while the ball's in the air, and then as it goes through the net, saying yes, 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 that virtually sealed the win for them. Now, calling NCAA Tournament games, especially in the early rounds, it's a given that you're going to be calling 4 games in one day in the first round. Is there a secret to preparing your mind, your body, your voice for calling 4 games in one day?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know that there's a secret. Maybe there is. I've never had one. In the first few times I did it, I could barely talk the next day. And for whatever reason, that hasn't been a problem in recent years. The secret that I've always found is to have great partners. And I've had great partners over the years. I worked for many years with Gus Johnson, and he and I worked very well together. And I've been extremely, extremely fortunate for the last 20 years to be able to work with Kevin Harlan. And I will tell you that if you can't look and sound good doing a basketball game when you're working with Kevin Harlan, then there's something seriously wrong with you. And But that's the whole thing for me. I like the games and I like meeting the people, but the folks I work with, my partners, the people back in the TV truck, it's as much a social and personal thing to me as it is the privilege of doing the games.
The Dan Bonner broadcasting tree is really impressive. In addition to Kevin Harlan and Gus Johnson that you mentioned, Brian Anderson, Sam Ryan, Lauren Shahadi, so many impressive fellow members of your broadcast team, and it makes for such a great call. And I know it's in your nature. You're a humble person, you're a self-deprecating person, but I'm going to ask you to uh, talk about your acumen a little bit more here. I mean, there has to be a reason, and I think many fans kind of sense what it is that we enjoy your calls for these many years on the NCAA tournament. There has to be a reason why you keep getting the chance to come back. What would you say that it is that you do well that continues to earn you these opportunities to come back and broadcast NCAA tournament games?
Boy, that's really a good question. And my whole thing has always been I've always tried to employ what I call the Hamlet theory, which is the game's the thing. That we're there to do the game. And the other thing that I try very hard to do is I try to make sure that I'm using, when I explain what's going on or try to explain what's going on, I'm trying to use terminology, language that the average viewer can understand. I don't want to seem like I'm a fool to coaches because I don't use all the fancy jargon, but I think it's very important that I explain things so the regular viewer can understand. And I will tell you that over the years, I think the best compliment that I receive is when people come up to me and say, "We're so happy when you're doing the game because we can understand what's going on." So I've always thought, I had something much, much less than a stellar college basketball career. I was never a coach. I was never an NBA player, so I don't have any of the background that a lot of my colleagues do. And I've told myself over the years that I think that I just survived by brute competence. And that's the best I can say. I don't know. I'm glad the people who hire me. But and I don't know why, and I wouldn't ask them why. But I've always told myself I survived through brute competence.
Now, is there to develop into the I'll say much more than competent broadcaster that you are now? Can you pinpoint a time when someone gave you some specific advice that helped your broadcasting technique, or were a lot of some of the most important things that you learned on your own?
Well, the very first broadcasting job I had was as the color analyst for the University of Virginia's radio network back in 1978. And I had a very hard time getting that job. The athletic director at Virginia at the time, the late Gene Corrigan, didn't want to hire me because I had no experience. But he couldn't find anybody else who was willing to work for $5 a game. So he hired me. And the person I was working with was a guy named Doug Logan, who did Virginia basketball, their play-by-play for many years. His first year was my first year. And then he went on and he did Syracuse radio for many, many years. And he is the one person, we used to go to Virginia practices, and when they scrimmaged, we would broadcast the scrimmages. And he would tell me, he would stop when we were doing, he'd say, "No, this is what I want you to do here. This is what I want you to do there." And the reason I mention that is he is the only person who has ever offered me anything like that. I have a good friend in broadcasting. He's the longtime announcer for the Atlanta Hawks named Bob Rathman, who once told me that there are only two kinds of TV executives: those who say, "Boy, you did a great job," and those who say, "Boy, you did a great job. Can you work Tuesday?" And I have found over the years that that's how you know whether somebody approves of what you do. They hire you to do the next game. But other than that, no, nobody's ever told me anything.
Bob Rathman, yes, he is. He has much wisdom. So for him to share that line, that sounds very much like a Bob Rathman line right there. One of the, it's amazing. I think many college basketball fans, and what's wonderful about the NCAA tournament, it brings avid college basketball fans and just casual or even less than casual basketball fans all together to join them. I think many people who have watched and listened to NCAA tournament games over the years they know you, even if they don't realize they know who Dan Bonner is. And I think some of them would realize that they know who you are from the now famous clip of the 2023 Furman upset over Virginia, which had a frantic finish to it. And there's this great clip of the broadcasting booth where Kevin Harlan, while making his call, is reaching across you and Stan Van Gundy to make sure that he has is able to make the call himself. Has there ever been a time when you've stepped on the play-by-play call as an analyst and that you think back to on all these years later?
Well, not stepped on the play-by-play call in terms of saying something. Very early, I realized that there are certain instances where the play-by-play person has the floor, and I do not, and I try to work my way in. But I tend to get very excited and very emotional, and so oftentimes I would shout out and or something like that. And I've actually had a couple of play-by-play partners. I had one person actually tell me that I couldn't do that, because that if I do that, then his call will never get on the call of the week or the call of the day or whatever it was. And, I tried very hard when I worked with that guy to not do that, but I can't help myself. And even in the game that you're talking about, I did do that. But again, nobody notices that because Kevin he gets so excited. And I found it funny, Nick, that people made such a big deal of Kevin spreading out his arms because, as I say, I've worked with Kevin for more than 20 years, and we're really good friends. And that's what he does. I mean, he does that all the time. It's not, and he was actually a little irritated that they had that camera on us because he's always felt like that booth is his private spot. But the reactions to that were very funny. And somebody said to me later, they said, well, you didn't seem as excited as everybody else. And my response to that was, well, my job in that situation is, after the initial excitement, is to look and to see what's going to happen next. There was still time left on the clock, and I was looking to see how much time there was and trying to get in my head what options Virginia would have. But that was something that everybody talks about, and it was a funny incident.
When you get your assignment for the NCAA tournament, or you're looking back on the games you've called in general and thinking about first round matchups, I mean, we know that those seed matchups are locked in: 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, 3 versus 14, and so on. What's your favorite type of first round game? What's your favorite type of matchup, just based on the seed numbers typically?
Well, I always think that the 8-9 game has the chance to be like the really good game. And generally it is. But, that Virginia Furman matchup was, I think, either a 5-12 or a 4-13. The thing is that over the years in the NCAA tournament, unless you're a 1 seed or a 2 seed, it doesn't really make any difference because, and even sometimes the 2 seeds, you're going to play a team that can beat you. Now, of course, we've had a couple of number 1 seeds lose, so obviously, but they can lose too. But that's a sort of a far-fetched kind of thing. But once if you're a 3 seed and you're playing a 14 in this day and age in the NCAA tournament, that's a team that can beat you. And so I don't really worry about that. My primary concern is I've got 8 teams, and I've got a very short period of time to prepare. And there are times when, like, 5 of maybe the 8 teams I've done during the season. And sometimes there's 1. And so, again, working with Kevin for so long, Kevin and I don't prepare the same things. That I prepare something and he prepares something else, and then we get together and we compare notes and we try to stay out of each other's lanes. The important thing about that is everybody watching those games, all the 8 teams, they could be the number 16 seed. They know all about their team. They're big fans of their team. And the important thing for me is to not make mistakes so that those people think I'm some sort of a fool. That I have to have the pronunciations right. I have to have all the stories right. And my rule is that if something happens and I'm not sure, then I just don't say anything, because it's hard for people to think I'm a complete idiot, like I am most of the time, if I just don't give them any evidence. So it's a fun day. I love that. I love the first and second. I love the first round. I love going to the practices before the games. I love meeting the players, talking to the coaches, and I love working with Kevin. Kevin. And for many years, Reggie Miller and now Stan Van Gundy, they have all been great partners. And we've had a number of different sideline reporters, Lauren Shahadi, Dana Jacobson, and many other people. I've been doing it for so long, I'll forget and I'll offend people, and I don't want to do that. But it's just I've been very, very fortunate with the people that I've been able to partner with.
It's interesting you mentioned practice. When you go to a practice, say the day before an NCAA tournament game, what is it that you're looking to take away from that practice that can help you on the call?
Well, the interesting thing is I'm looking at the players. Until the pandemic, and this is something that everybody thinks is sort of funny, until the pandemic, I never knew anybody's number. I didn't pay any attention to anybody's number. I would look at the players, and I would try to identify, certain features of the players, so I would be able to know who it was in action without having to look down at my notes and see what their number was. So I'm looking at the players. I want to see how they move. I want to see how they deal with one another. I want to see how they deal with the coach. I want to see what their demeanor is. And it's just really fun. A lot of the players from the smaller schools, the schools with the higher seeds, the worst seeds, that they're just very excited to be there. We had Grambling State last year, and they had just come from a win in the first four, and they were wonderful young men, and the coach was really great. And it's funny, the producer had been in the back, and he came out, and we're talking to the Grambling coach, and the Grambling coach was talking about how he'd gotten a call from the vice president. And our producer says, okay, the vice president of your school, what's that vice president's name? And the guy looked at him and said, no, the vice president. And our producer still didn't understand. And I said, it's the vice president of the United States. I said, we all knew who that is. So, but it's just seeing those people and how excited they are to be in the NCAA tournament is a lot of fun. And, there's a lot of coaches that we've dealt with who are really fun. We've had like TJ Otzelberger in Iowa State in the tournament the last couple of years. And he always wears those really tight T-shirts, and he shows off his muscles, and he's just a wonderful person. And we usually have a lot of fun.
The game has evolved, and there's been so many innovations during the time that you've been on the call. Thinking about it just from a broadcasting perspective, or the way the games are presented on broadcast, what's one of the best innovations or changes that you've seen over the years that you've been on the call?
Well, one of the best and one of the worst at the same time is all these dang reviews. We used to go and we played basketball. We didn't have, we weren't stopping it all the time to look at this or look at that. We didn't have this obsession with getting things right. But I think it's important to get things right. And I think that, they're trying to tweak the thing. They've got some new rules this year about the number of reviews and when you can review. And so, but I think that's the biggest change since I've been involved. Of course, the 3-point line, interesting enough, when I started broadcasting, we didn't have a 3-point line. We didn't have a shot clock. So those have obviously been huge innovations, but I think the biggest recent innovation is the fact that we review things. And even though there are some times where I feel like, no, I don't want to have any of those doggone reviews, that's the biggest recent change.
Some other major changes to college athletics overall in the last 5 to 10 years have been the way that players are compensated, also transfer rules, and the legalization of gambling. And thinking about it, not whether those are good or bad, I'm not as interested in that necessarily, but just thinking about it from someone who gets to be in these arenas and soak up the atmosphere and the climate and the noise there. these changes over the last 5 to 10 years, has it affected the passion of fans? Has it made them more passionate, less passionate? Has it changed the atmosphere at all inside the arena, these changes that have happened in the last 5 to 10 years?
Well, that's a good question, Nick. And my answer to that would be no. As far as changing the passion inside the arenas, the people who are going to go to the arenas, they're going to have a good time. Now, I have talked with people who I know who are fans of college basketball, who are fans of certain teams, and who have told me that they're disgusted with the whole thing because they don't know any of the players on their teams. But that's not. I haven't sensed that in terms of in the arenas. And whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But I mean, good heavens, the schools in particular get so much money. And the coaches get so much money that I am not opposed at all to the players getting whatever they can. And the coaches, I mean, you've had examples of coaches, they change like every other year or every year. And so I don't mind that the players have that same ability. The whole gambling thing concerns me. There's always been gambling, but the fact that it's now legal gambling and people talk about gambling, I just hope that we don't have some huge scandal that destroys people's faith in the games.
One innovation that's on the table is possible expansion of the NCAA tournament. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, as you know, Nick, I'm old. And so that means I'm old school. And I've always thought that 64 was the right number. But if you're going to tell me that you want to expand the NCAA tournament to provide more opportunities for more players to participate in the NCAA tournament, then I'm on board with that. If you're going to tell me that you need to expand the NCAA tournament because there's so many more Division I teams than there used to be, then I'm not on board with that, because all of those additions to Division I have gone to conferences that only get one bid. So it doesn't matter whether in those conferences there's 5 teams or 55 teams. They're only going to get one bid. The expansion of the tournament will help 1 or 2 of those mid-major schools, like in Indiana State from a couple of years ago, that didn't get the bid. But for the most part, we're going to see more major, middle of the range, major conference teams in there. And I'm not opposed to that. I don't want to see like 96 teams or anything. If they're going to expand and they want to put like another first 4, like a Western version of Dayton somewhere, and add those teams, then, that's okay with me. But the NCAA tournament is a beast that is really fun. And I think it's really enjoyed by the public. I think it's something that's, not as big as the Super Bowl, obviously, but when you think of other events in this country, sporting wise, it's right up there with all those other events. And I just don't want us to tinker around with it so much that we lose what has the NCAA tournament has been.
Well, as someone, I am very open to change in many ways, but I am not convinced at this point that expanding the NCAA tournament will be a good change. So I lean against that, hoping that it does not expand beyond 68 teams. Shifting to baseball, you've actually broadcast baseball for the ACC for over 20 years. I'm curious, is there a player who you got to call that many of our audience members would instantly recognize the name? And if so, did you see their potential as you were calling their games while they were in college?
That's a very good question. I think the honest answer to that is no. I grew up with baseball. Baseball was my first sport. I played baseball until they wouldn't let me play anymore. I actually played on, in where I grew up in Pittsburgh, they had, teams that were like mill teams and stuff like that. And, I did things like that. And I was never very good at it, but I always had a good time doing it. And when I was asked to do baseball, it was sort of out of nowhere. I had done one season of baseball, professional baseball, in the old Class A Carolina League. I think the Carolina League might be AAA now, but in the old Class A Carolina League, I did a season of baseball just because I wanted to expand my broadcasting horizon when I was young and really foolish. And based on that, the guys from Fox Sports South is what it was called then. They came to me and they said, look, we need some help with our college baseball. We don't necessarily want somebody that knows a lot about baseball, but we know you have a little bit of a background and we want somebody who knows about broadcasting. So would you help us out? And I did. And I had a good time. There's a lot of great players. Ryan Zimmerman is one who jumps to mind, who played at Virginia and who had a great career in Major League Baseball. And one of the people that the coach, a guy named Elliot Avent from North Carolina State, always wanted me to sit down and talk to was Russell Wilson, who, never made it as a baseball player, but, was a great football player. And,
James, he probably could. He probably could have made it as a baseball player if he chose to go that route. Yeah.
Jameis Winston played baseball at Florida State. So there was a lot of guys out there, but in terms of my ability to say, wow, this guy, he's going to be a good Major League Baseball player, I never possessed that and never claimed to possess that.
Among your other roles, you coached the University of Virginia women's basketball team in the 1970s, and then you've also coached high school girls basketball. What's a main lesson that you've taken away from your time as a coach? I'm sure you've been able to learn a lot, but if you could sum it up as one or two major lessons that you take away from that time as a coach, what would it be?
The major lesson to my mind would be, number one, it's all about relationship development. You have to develop relationships with your players. You have to work at it. You have to develop those relationships because leadership is basically a relationship building thing. You build trust. And so that would be the main takeaway that I would have. And the one thing that I learned, not when I was coaching the women's team at Virginia, because I had no idea what I was doing. They made me the head coach. And it's funny, back in the 70s, the early 70s, and they made me the head coach basically because I was a guy. And my assistant coach was a woman. And the only reason she was the assistant coach because I was a woman, because we had both graduated from school. Neither one of us had any coaching experience. And interestingly, because we were the women's coaches, we were not full-time coaches. We were graduate assistants. And not only were we graduate assistants, but we had to split one graduate assistantship. And so they finally wised up, and, Gene Corrigan, the same athletic director who got me involved with broadcasting, got me uninvolved with coaching. And he hired my assistant coach to coach the team, which was a brilliant move on his part because she was Debbie Ryan, and she's in the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame.
That's amazing.
So that was a very good move on his part, but I didn't know what I was doing. And so that was different. Although the relationship building thing was something that was very obvious to me. In fact, it was so obvious, I ended up marrying one of the players, and I'm married to her almost 50 years later. But anyhow, the high school thing, that really brought that into focus for me. It was an adventure dealing with high school girls, and I found the relationship building process very, very rewarding. And the other thing I realized was that less is more. Whenever I tried to get clever as the coach, that's usually when we got me in trouble. What I tried to do is point the kids in the right direction and let them go. I tried to give them as much freedom in decision-making as possible. And those were my primary lessons, that relationship building and giving the kids freedom to make their own decisions. Now, I was coaching at an unbelievably low level, obviously, but those 4 years I spent coaching the girls' high school team are one of the big adventures of my life.
You have served for over 30 years. You had a stint for over 30 years leading a youth sports program in Virginia. What is it about youth sports in general that you would change? And what is something about youth sports that you actually think does better now than it did, say, a generation ago?
Well, let's start with talking about what youth sports does well. And I don't know that it does it better, but I think youth sports is an opportunity for kids to get out there and be part of something bigger than themselves, that they can be part of a team, that they can learn, how to give up things from their own personal aspect to be part of the team and to do things for the team and to work together with other kids. I think that's extremely valuable. I think that the competitiveness of the thing, we have a youth baseball program, and it's much smaller now because of travel baseball, that every parent thinks that their kid is, if not going to be a Major League Baseball star, then going to be a college star. And so they don't really spend a lot of time allowing the kids to enjoy themselves. It's a very competitive, a very hard thing sometimes on the kids. And so that's I think what has gotten worse, and that's what I would change. And but again, I think youth sports is a very valuable thing. I think it teaches the kids lessons that they can't learn anywhere else.
One more way out of many that you've served your community is two-time president of a local Kiwanis club. I'm curious, is there a particular initiative or project, some type of service that your club did that you're especially proud of?
Our club runs the baseball program. That's why I got involved in the club, because the club, it's actually Stanton Kiwanis baseball is what we call it. And that's why I got involved with the club, is because we did youth baseball and my kids played in the youth baseball league. And I thought maybe I could help out. And like everything else I do, I say I'm going to help out and I end up being in charge, which is never my goal going in, but happens from time to time. And the baseball thing, it's just something that I've been doing. My son is 41 years old now, and that started when he was 7. So I've been doing it a long time.
As we come down the stretch here, curious, looking back on your career and how you've been able to have such an enjoyable broadcasting career, I'm wondering, if you haven't said it already, what is the single best career advice that you've gotten from anyone in being able to build the career that you've had?
I told you what Bob Rathman told me, and that's piece of advice number 2. The first piece of advice that I got, and something that has been very true, was from C.D. Chesley, who was the first person who hired me to do television. C.D. Chesley Productions, doing the ACC. And after I worked a couple of games for him one year, he sat me down. And at the time, I had another job. I was just doing this, because it was fun. And he said to me, "I think you're pretty good at this." He said, "Tell me, what are your goals in this business?" And, I didn't have any goals in the business. I just wanted to do games. But I told him something that I really believe, and I've tried to, never achieved it, I don't think, but it's always been one of my goals. I told him I want to be the best. Whatever I'm doing, I want to be the best. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he said, "That's not the right goal." And I didn't really know what to say. And he said, "In this business, you work as hard as you can, you prepare as well as you can, you work as well as you can with other people, but always remember that this business has nothing to do with good or bad. It's all about taste. If they like you, they'll hire you. If they don't, they won't." And so Mr. Chesley's advice and Bob Rathman's advice, they've been my 2 pillars of my broadcasting career.
Well, that's wonderful. And I appreciate that. I appreciate all of your time and your insight. This has been such a great visit. I want to finish by saying that I want to reiterate my appreciation looking way back at 2007, when I was on a journey to introduce a new way of ending basketball games, and a concept which has now become known as the Elam Ending, and we've seen it implemented in various settings. And at first, I was just trying to generate any type of discussion or get any kind of feedback that I could in 2007, reaching out high and low everywhere I could to anyone, and it was hard to get any type of response at all from anyone. But I got a response from Dan Bonner that was not just 1 or 2 sentences. It was 1,200 words of a really thoughtful feedback and insight, and it's just a way of it's just an example of the generous spirit that you are, and the kindness that you show in sharing your feedback to that. And it's still an email that I save, and it's still something that I truly appreciate it. It's an indication of the kind of person you are, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate your time today joining us on the interview.
Well, Nick, thank you very much. I received that thing from you, and I looked at it, And I'm always interested in people who have good ideas. I mean, we don't move forward unless people make suggestions. And I thought that was very innovative. As I told you in that email, I didn't have much confidence that it would ever be implemented. And I was thrilled that it has been implemented in a couple of different settings. But I read through that thing and I thought, wait a minute. This person has gone through an awful lot of effort with this. And if he is going to select me as one of the people he sent this to, then by God, I'm going to give this some attention because I like this idea. And so, Nick, I thought it was very creative. I like creative people. I'm not one myself. I appreciate the invitation to be on with you. I will tell you something that we first met at the basketball tournament in Richmond when one of my good friends in broadcasting, Rob Reichley, asked me to go and help him out because whoever was supposed to do it didn't. And I was a little intimidated by that because I had no idea who these players were or anything else. And I got there and somebody told me, they said, wow, we're going to use the Elam Ending. And I said to them, what do you mean the Elam Ending? Are you talking about Nick Elam? And they said, well, yeah. And I said, well, that's how are we going to use that? That was really creative. And they said, well, you can talk to Nick Elam. I said, I can talk to Nick Elam. He's here. So I was very excited to meet Nick Elam. So and that was fun. I was glad to meet you. And I still think that's one of the most creative things I've ever seen associated with basketball.
Well, I appreciate your kind words then and now. And just like any basketball fan, look forward to many more years of you on the call of NCAA tournament games. Thank you so much, Dan Bonner, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you for having me. Best wishes to you. Good luck. Hope everything goes well for you.
Thank you. In the innovation segment, we discuss innovations good and bad, and in most cases, these will be playing rules. But really, it can be any innovation in the sports world at any stage of implementation or brainstorming. And many of these innovations will be submitted by you. To submit an idea for an innovation to discuss on the podcast, you can reach out by email. That's nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. In this episode, we discuss the automated ball strike challenge system for Major League Baseball, which will be used for the first time in Major League Baseball in 2026 after being experimented with at spring training and in the minor leagues and even at the 2025 All-Star Game. The way the ABS challenge system works is that an automated strike zone will be used for every pitch. The human umpire's call will stand unless it's challenged by either the batter, the pitcher, or the catcher and challenged immediately. And then it goes to a quick review, and each team will get 2 unsuccessful challenges throughout the game. And even I've come around to embrace the challenge aspect of this system specifically. I've always been a proponent of an automated strike calling system, but the way of using this in a way that preserves the look and the feel of a game and also preserves and enhances the human element of the game in a really interesting way has made me favor now the challenge system rather than just using the automated strike zone across the board. So on a 0 to 10 scale, how confident am I that this is a good idea? I think it's at least a 9. The only potential drawback would be if the technology fails. And I don't mean instances when the technology breaks down here or there, which that will happen. But even when it does, that just means we revert to the way that games have always been called. It's not necessarily an inferior way of doing it than the way we have in the past. But the reason, the type of faultiness that would concern me is if, say, in a particular ballpark that the strike zone's not calibrated correctly, that it's calling every pitch of every game played there incorrectly, something like that. But I think there will be a robust enough inspection system that won't happen. The challenge system or the automated strike zone system in general is necessary. We've seen that umpires get about 93 to 94% of calls correct when on taken pitches on whether it's a ball or strike. And I really admire the job that umpires do. I don't think that any other human beings on earth necessarily could do a better job at that than what the current Major League Baseball umpires do. But that's the point, is that there are limitations to what humans can do when they're trying to call whether a pitch is in the strike zone or not. And the automated system addresses those limitations and allows us to see the human beings that we really came to see, which is the players. Only being accurate 93 to 94% of the time on taken pitches, that implies roughly that there's about one pitch that's being miscalled every full inning. And this will improve on that. And there's also a positive example of how this type of a system has already been implemented that we can point to. And even though comparing tennis to baseball, that's an apples to orange comparison in many ways, but tennis was the forerunner in implementing an automated line calling system and incorporating a challenge element to it. And there is no one in the tennis world who would argue that we should go back to the old way of calling lines. And I don't think that we'll have, after enough time passes, I don't think we'll have anyone arguing that we should get rid of the ABS challenge system in Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball is implementing this in a way that prevents or curtails a lot of the concerns that were voiced for many years when this type of an idea was discussed. One of them being that it was going to be very unfriendly to umpires. Well, with the system that they're rolling out, umpires will still have all of the responsibilities that they've had before, and home plate umpires really do have many other responsibilities besides calling balls and strikes. And then they're going to still be calling balls and strikes, and now they're going to be facilitating the replay system and the challenge part of it. So really, there is important, maybe more important than ever, the human umpires. And so they're being very conscious of how this preserves the same atmosphere that we're familiar with for people in attendance and viewers at home. It's going to largely have the same look and the sound and the feel that it currently does for those in the ballpark. And for those in the ballpark and at home, there'll even be a little added fun of the oohs and ahs as we watch for the replay graphic to come through to see whether the original call was correct or not. There was a concern that this type of system might add time to the game when baseball's made such concerted effort to reduce the time of a game. But the fact that only the batter, the pitcher, the catcher, the only ones who can make this call or challenge a call, they can't consult their manager, they can't consult their teammates, they can't consult a replay specialist. They have to make that challenge immediately by tapping their helmet. That eliminates any concern that this will add time to the game. And these replay graphics will be corrected or upheld to the original call in a matter of seconds. If there was ever concern that this was going to be a culture shock for players, that's alleviated by the fact that with testing this system in the minor leagues for years, many of the current major league players are very familiar with this system already. And that also goes to testing it out in spring training. And also what was probably the loudest concern that was voiced over the years was probably also the flimsiest argument that having an automated replay system or an automated ball strike system would somehow ruin the human element of the game. I thought that argument was pretty flimsy on its face because no one watches a game or goes to the ballpark to see umpires make calls in general, and they certainly don't go to the ballpark to see umpires make bad calls. Absolutely no one is going to miss bad calls made on balls and strikes. But if you are someone who values the human element of the game, the challenge system has an interesting way of enhancing the human element. So if you're thinking of the umpires as humans, really anytime there's a challenge, there's a positive takeaway for them. If there's a challenge and the original call is upheld, it's very redeeming for the umpire. It helps to highlight how great of a job they do in calling balls and strikes. And if a call happens to be overturned, maybe there's even a sense of relief from that. Instead of that call affecting the game in some way, the call is able to be corrected and everyone can move on. There's even an extra human element introduced when it relates to players too. If you're a player who makes a challenge on a call and it turns out that the original call was correct, well, now you have to answer to your teammates, to your manager, possibly even to your fans, that you made this decision to challenge a call that was already correct. That's especially true if you don't have that situational awareness, if you're challenging in low leverage situations. And if you're a player who challenges a call that was correct originally, then you also have to look the umpire in the eye at some point, knowing that you challenged their call when they got it right the first time. I also think the spirit of the system is exactly what it should be. When replay was introduced for all calls in Major League Baseball on the bases, there for that first year, there were so many players who were being called out on slides when their foot or hand might come an inch off the base and be tagged out. And in my mind, I thought, well, this isn't really what the spirit of this rule is. And I thought maybe some extra legislation within the rule should be added to address certain calls of that type. But it self-corrected very quickly. What it did was it actually forced players to add a new skill. And what we've seen are really some very artful and skillful slides into bases where players are able to, beyond belief sometimes, hold on to the bag and stay on the bag so that it's able to withstand a replay review. And we find that, yes, they did indeed hold the bag. So the replay, in a way, raised players' skill level when it came to sliding. And what this ABS challenge system might do is also highlight players who have a real awareness of the strike zone, but then also a real situational awareness of when is an appropriate or inappropriate time to challenge a call, just based on the inning, the score, the number of outs, and the runners on base. And yes, there will be occasional games that end on a challenge, but I don't see that as a drawback at all, because the alternative is to potentially end a game on a missed call, and that's not better in any way than ending a game on a challenge. So I am very excited to see the automated ball strike challenge system continue to be a part of Major League Baseball for years to come. So I encourage you to send your ideas for a future innovation segment. Remember, you can do that by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. In the next to last segment, we acknowledge a next to last from the past. And in most cases, this will be a next to last from the world of sports. But in this episode, we look at a next to last in the world of pop culture. The Sopranos, with creator, writer, and executive producer David Chase, and with James Gandolfini leading an amazing cast, was one of the most revolutionary television series of all time, ushering in our current century of TV shows with a production quality, storylines, characters that previously you could only find at the movie theater. Sopranos had arguably the most talked about finale in series history on an episode that aired on June 10th, 2007, but it's actually the episode right before that aired on June 3rd, 2007, which is the subject of this next to last, an episode called The Blue Comet. And what we loved about The Sopranos were the amazing storylines and characters, most notably James Gandolfini's portrayal of Tony Soprano, one of the most iconic television characters of all time, but also the way that this show balanced some of the heaviest themes imaginable with humor, and how it balanced its characters who found the most reprehensible and irredeemable ways of making a living and made them exceedingly human in the way they lived their life at home and some of the issues they had to navigate in their lives. There was also a noticeable evolution over the course of the series in the way that the show portrayed life and death. In the early seasons, portraying life as disposable and death as trivial, and by the end of the series, having a depth and a reverence in the way that it portrayed life and death that was hard to match. Now, as the final season came near its end, there were still many storylines that were uncertain where they might go. Just to name a few, that was Tony's dynamic with Melfi. That was AJ's well-being, the direction that Meadow was going to go with her life. But in this episode, The Blue Comet, the most notable storyline was the relationship between the Soprano crime family in New Jersey and the Lupertazzi crime family in New York. Their relationship was becoming untenable, and it was reaching a fever pitch in the episode The Blue Comet. There were killings between the two families and threats of more killings and constant paranoia about the potential betrayal of members of each family. Now, those things in themselves weren't all that unusual. That was a constant theme of the show, but it was really chilling the way that the situation was becoming untenable in this particular episode, with organizations and families and lives unraveling at record speed. Everyone is truly in survival mode, and Tony Soprano is working for most of the episode to try to separate himself from his family because he knows being around his family makes them less safe. And by the end of the episode, he is surrounded by his most trusted men in a safe house, not knowing how long they'll be there, who might be coming for them. And Tony, a man we had known to be powerful and influential, full of life, living life at full speed at all times, was now alone in a dark bedroom in this safe house, clutching a rifle, not knowing who might be coming through that door or when. He was alone with his thoughts, and we see that one of the prevailing thoughts was a flashback to a conversation he had had with Bobby Bacala, pondering some of the specific sensory aspects of death itself. And when you add in some eerie music to all of that, it makes for one of the most goosebump-inducing images in all of television. And the last thing I'd like to do is to thank all of you for your engagement with Sports Rule Pod. Remember, if you have an idea for a sports rule change or an innovation that you'd like for me to scrutinize on a future episode, you could submit that idea by email, nick.elam@sportsrulepod.com, or X or Instagram @sportsrulepod. Like or subscribe wherever you follow the podcast. And remember that Season 1 episodes are released every 2 weeks on Friday mornings. We'll see you next time.